Shout out loud, you're a geek, nerd. Yes, watch us emote with passions unheard. We may be a bit odd and a tad unique, but we shall carouse, revel and geek. Shout out loud, you're a nerd.
Hello and welcome to Three Geeks in a Pod. My name is Errol.
I'm Manda.
I'm Ja-Mez.
And we have a special guest today, Andrew Dundass, who comes with us all the way from about
Down
20 meters. He is here because today we are talking about Doctor Who, and he is a huge Doctor Who fan like I'm a Totoro fan. Now, for all of those of you that are just listening in, you can chat with us because we are doing this live, and you'll find that in, where is the chat? Oh, if you go to 3geeksinapod3.com/live, you will find the chat right there embedded, and you can join in, you can talk, ask questions. Someone might be paying attention to the screen. Actually, everybody always pays attention to the screen and doesn't talk. And that's what I find. But I will be paying attention to the screen because for the first time I am facing the screen.
Yes.
And I have the keyboard, so I have changed the text to blue, and we're all good.
But it's not your typical color blue. It's like a darker blue this week.
Well, I
Usually
couldn't
lighter
reach,
blue,
I
like
couldn't
more of a
reach the
turquoise.
mouse. That's the problem.
Oh,
If you
okay.
listened to last week, you would have heard my song was in the last week's episode. Woohoo!
We have a theme. I'm so happy.
I should probably see if I get my Doctor Who song done. I could probably
You
give
should.
that to you for this week's episode.
Yeah.
No, you need 30 seconds of it.
We
don't
wrote a
you?
Doctor Who
Yeah.
No, I need less. I need like 8 seconds.
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
such a hard time trying to cut down your song to like a little 10-second bumper. In fact, I had to extend my animation just to make it match. But anyways, as we were saying, we're talking about Doctor Who this week, and as we've announced, we have a special guest with us, Andrew.
He's my friend. He can
Hi.
now he's everybody else's friend.
It's only Manda's friend. She's not sharing
only
with
his
anyone
an
else.
actor.
He's an actor friend of mine, and he knows everything there is to know about, or a lot to know about
Yeah, I
Doctor
say
Who.
there's too much for anybody to
There's
know
no-
everything.
Which we accidentally discovered just before the show started because me and him started chatting and
Yeah.
geeking out about it and having an episode off air. And
So
Manda
just
and Errol were like,
Whoa.
guys, save it, slow down, stop.
Pudding and just juice don't mix very well. Do you have chips?
I have popcorn, but you can't.
Oh,
that's
no,
gonna take
not
time.
popcorn,
Sorry.
If you listen carefully there, people out in Radio-land, you can hear the smacking of Errol lips.
encourage him.
Smack, smacks.
As
Oh,
he is
yummy
eating
smacky
delicious
smack, smack.
chocolate pudding.
All right. So
We could talk about chocolate pudding instead of
we
Doctor
could
Who.
talk about that, but I really want to talk about Doctor
Because
Who.
we don't have time. So let's start off
Wait.
with...
First warning, this is going to be a very spoiler-ridden podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So if
For
you don't
all
want to
of
hear
Doctor Who.
for all of it, the entire series, old and new. So, I think we were going to start off because you had sort of a good thing going with how it all started, and
Yeah, well, you were saying you were watching the...
Well, yeah, the Adventure in Time and Space, which was they put that out for the 50th anniversary,
which I haven't seen, and yeah.
and it's
you
this
haven't seen it yet?
it's this fascinating little docudrama that I don't know how accurate it is, but it gives some interesting insight into the creation of the show. And two of the things I found fascinating was, first of all, it was intended to be educational, which, I mean, you can kind of see that in that it's, a time-traveling show and they're trying to kind of focus on different historical periods, but at the same time, they're not necessarily always historically accurate in their depiction, but they still try. And then the other thing I found really fascinating from this was that it was headed by a female in the 1960s, which is basically unheard of. And she was like a huge part of, why it became what it is. And the first director of it, and I don't know how long he was with it, but was a gay Indian man, which, a person of color and a homosexual in the 1960s, and a woman leading a show that has lasted 50 years, and they helped shape the early part of the show that, what it's become. That's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely amazing. And of course, the other big historical fact that I wanted to get in here was, of course, the significance of the date that it aired on, November
Yeah.
23rd, 1963.
why is that
The
significant?
day after...
No, it was the day of.
The day after. It was the day after he did that. He was
Are you
shot
sure?
on the 22nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, the first episode basically got interrupted by Kennedy's assassination.
Oh,
So they had to replay the first episode when they aired the second episode because nobody watched the pilot.
Yeah.
Right. Holy crap.
Yeah, yeah, and I imagine most people out there are fans of the new series. I'm a little creakier. My first memory was of on TV Ontario back in the 70s when I was 4 years old, going between Tom Baker and John Pertwee, who were the third and fourth Doctors. And by the way, just as an aside, if you haven't seen the 50th anniversary thing, one of the purest, I don't want to call it geek out moments because there's something deeper than that. When Tom Baker appeared,
oh yeah,
I heard that voice. Like, he was for a whole generation
the
Doctor. I think in many ways for people, he's still he's one of many great Doctors.
He and Tennant are usually go back and forth between who's the most popular Doctor.
Yeah. So seeing what happened with Tennant was interesting because it was the first time since Tom Baker they really seemed to show to kind of capture the zeitgeist, like a character, like the character is right at the center of the culture. And Tom Baker was wonderful, and then to hear that voice, like I'm sure I must have. It was.
You've shown me a few episodes of Tom Baker, yeah.
And it was and he was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful in the part. But it was like, I want to describe it like getting a hug from someone you thought you'd never see again. But it's just like you don't know. He's 80 years old. He might not live much longer, and just to see him back and hear that wonderful.
And considering
voice.
he is the oldest Doctor living right now,
Yeah.
like we've lost the other three, first three, and we don't know how much longer the other Bakers are going to be around either. He's not looking very healthy.
He never looked good. But back to the original time when the show started, and it was. I think that in many ways there's all sorts of great moments, and there's bits in the history that I'd say I like more, or I'd say that are my personal favorites more than the original series with William Hartnell when Verity Lambert was the producer. But I'm of the firm belief that was the greatest period of Doctor Who.
Really?
Because
Sorry, the fourth Doctor period?
No, the first Doctor.
The first Doctor?
The first, like,
okay.
1963 when it starts out. Mm-hmm. That is the best and boldest and most wonderful time of Doctor Who because everything the show is now, it has been. Like, it's kind of like there's bits where it's wonderful, and because it is essentially a magic door out of children's literature, right? Mm-hmm. It's like in Narnia, you step through the cupboard and there's another world, or Tom's Midnight Garden.
It's pure whimsy most of the time.
It's that fundamental bit in children's literature. On what's different is though that this magic door goes anywhere
in time or space.
So it's like this wonderful, incredible, and insane narrative device that you figure, how could anyone think they could do this on a network television budget? And it's still, there's huge budgetary limitations now.
And you also don't have the same problem that Star Trek had, where it was trying to do the same thing of, whatever set they had on hand that week, whatever movie they were shooting, they'd go to that planet. But it was always time locked to their specific time.
Yeah.
And it would always just be, well, this planet just happens to look like Roman gladiators.
Yep.
This happens to look like
Wild
the Old West.
Yep.
We can actually go back to the Old West. We can actually go back to the Roman gladiators. We can go back to Gallifrey in 300 years ago. Yeah. We can go anywhere we want and do anything we want.
It's an amazing thing when you think about it. The reason it's lasted. Like, there's all these wonderful things about it, but primarily it's like this sense of every other show, no matter how great. And I have shows that I love, like Deadwood. I think Deadwood is an amazing show.
Yeah.
But Deadwood can only ever be in the Dakota Territories in the 1870s. A cop procedural. NYPD Blue is one of my favorite shows. It can only ever be in New York in the present day. This show, there's no other show that can do this, can do anything. It's only limited by the imagination of the writers and the ability of the people to realize it.
And even other time travel shows can't do that either because they're always terrestrial. They're always locked to...
There's something...
Like Back to the Future tried to do it by making their time machine portable, but it's still... You can only go where there's roads.
Yeah. And there's...
Well, I don't know. Later on.
Well, there is the hover conversion, but I mean, you're still kind of... You can't go to other planets, is the idea that I'm trying to get at.
It really is that amazing bit where you have... And because it can go anywhere, it's limitless. Now, sometimes that could be a problem because you can... And I think Stephen Moffat, I love Stephen Moffat.
Although Sliders could have probably done that.
Yeah.
Not that I watched Sliders.
Not that anyone watched Sliders.
I loved Sliders.
Sliders was actually the replacement for the Doctor Who that when Fox was trying to do Doctor Who with Paul McGann. Mm-hmm. They didn't think it worked. They thought, well, we could do a time travel show that we give half the profits to BBC, or we could kind of torpedo what this happened and we could have a time travel show and keep all the advertising revenue for ourselves. So that's what they decided to do.
Which is funny because when I saw the opening for the New Who, when they're doing the
it's like Sliders.
I thought it reminded me of the Sliders effect when they're going through their time vortex.
Which they borrowed, though, from the original Doctor Who series.
Yeah, no, I know. I hadn't seen much of the old Doctor Who, so when I started watching New Who, I'm like, they stole it from Sliders. Come on.
So one thing that kind of always fascinated me with Doctor Who after I watched it was that I found out it was a children's show. And then I talked to you, Andrew, and you were talking about watching it as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And being behind the couch.
That behind the whole sofa stuff, like, I was terrified of the show. Actually, this is I think it's an interesting story. It could be incredibly dull, and if it is, I apologize to anyone listening. But the reason I first started watching it, it was a punishment for my brother and I. We're probably 4.5. I was 4.5 to 5. My brother's a year younger than I was. And we were being like 4-year-old, 5-year-olds bouncing around the house and screaming. And, and my mom said, just shut up and watch this, because it was on TV Ontario. And my mother knew it because her brother, my Uncle John, was a fan of it when it was shown on CBC on the original run with William Hartnell, and knew that it was really good at shutting up young boys. They just sit and watch it. And I remember being put down in front of it. And it was one called The Ark in Space. And there was this thing, and now it was like it was a slug, like a green slug crawling around this space station. And I was horrified by it and never wanted not to watch it. Like, always wanted to come back to watch it.
Well, even the new Who, as corny as some episodes are, like, I still think the Slovene one of the most ridiculous things.
My kids
there are two characters that I continue to find scary. Although they've kind of ruined one of them, the Weeping Angels. Yeah. When you see them originally in Blink, that was one of the scariest episodes I've ever seen. Yeah. And for the first episode of the two-parter, The Empty Child and Dr. Dances, the kid with the mask.
Oh, the kid with the mask.
So every time I see anyone with a gas, yes,
it's like it's very good because it's. I remember when that happened. And there's a schoolyard in our neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And I'm walking by. I have to walk by the schoolyard on my way to the subway. And when that happened, because when you were a kid, it was more popular than I thought it was. But it was like you could, and in England, it's definitely that you would play Doctor Who and whatever monster you would get. And I'd walk by, and this one goes, "Are you my mommy? Oh no, don't touch me!" I'm walking by the schoolyard and going, holy cow. And it's one of the things that is amazing to me as a long-time fan of that show.
Your mommy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But one thing, as a long-time fan of the show that I love, is that I grew up with a show that had, you would dream about. You have this incredible imaginative stuff and would scare you to death. And then I realized at that moment that the show has come back, it is a success, and there's a whole new group of kids who are seeing things that expand their imagination and scare the pants off them, just like there was generations beforehand. And I love the fact that the idea of the show, and it goes up and down in quality, and it always went up and down in quality, like often week to week, let alone like season.
Even within the episode.
Even within the episode.
Yeah, one of your kids.
Oh, my kids both love the show. They actually do. So it's really fun because it's one of the only shows that we could sit down and watch all together.
Yeah.
And my youngest who's 9, I was watching Eccleston at the time.
Yeah.
And she said, "What are you doing? Watching TV? What are you watching?" It doesn't matter. Yeah. Just go play somewhere. Can I watch? You won't understand it. Why do you want to watch this? I want to watch. Fine, watch. Can I see the next episode?
Right?
And then after a few episodes, we get to The Empty Child, and my eldest daughter, who's now 12, comes down. What are you watching? Doctor Who. Oh. And then she sits down. We get to The Empty Child. Half an hour in, she's upstairs. She can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, are you my mommy? Oh, this is scary.
Yeah.
But Zoe stuck it through the whole thing. So she watched almost all of Tennant and all of Smith with me, actually, because she loved it. Absolutely loved it.
And this is what the show has always done, and it's wonderful. And you always said a children's show. It was actually always, and it's always meant for kids, but it's always been meant for as a show for the family to watch.
Yeah.
And
I love that it's multi-generational now.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's like there's usually, when it's at its best, there's scary stuff for the kids or silly stuff. I always thought Smith was really good at being silly, And as much as the older I get, you like your doctors to be more serious, but then you realize that when you were a kid, you liked it when the doctor was a little goofy and was so approachable. And it's one thing you always have to remember, is that this show is always, on top of trying to do everything at once, is always trying to appeal to a really wide group. But just back to the point about the original series when it first came out. So all the things the show is now is wonderful, but that was because back in this cramped little TV studio back in 1963 with like absolutely no budget, Verity Lambert and the crew there somehow managed to put on a show in a TV studio where you could go anywhere every week. to any kind of point. And they did it beautifully. And you watch it now, and it is very much 1960s television with that pacing.
Which explains why a monster's coming after you with a plunger and an egg beater.
Yeah. But still, it looks fantastic. Yeah, it really does. And it still looks good now. So there's this great bit where they managed to make this show that is insane that you would think you would ever try to attempt this on a movie budget, let alone a TV budget. And it worked and was wonderful.
Yeah.
And it still is. And it's often been... So you could watch it nowadays or watch the 70s stuff. And I still love all that stuff. I don't know if anyone watching it today would like it the same way. Although I've been surprised at fans of the new series watching it.
When you showed me, because, you know, as soon as I said I like Doctor Who, you brought me to your vast DVD collection.
I got all of them, yeah.
And so you showed me Sarah Jane Smith's departure. That was one thing you showed me. Because I had just watched the episode in which she returns and they make a huge deal out of it, and I was sitting there saying, like, who's Sarah Jane Smith? And you're, you know, so
she was my favorite. She was like,
and
she's still my favorite.
Like, aside from the fact that, you know, obviously the effects are going to be dated, like when you show a spaceship flying through the air, and it's like, yeah, that's something on a string. But at the same time, it was still fun to watch, and it was still fun to see the Doctor being.
And I think that leans heavily on. Especially, you know, after the second Doctor on, it leans heavily on the personalities of the Doctor too. Yeah. And
it did on the first two. The first guy actor was wonderful. He really was.
Was he? Okay, I've only ever seen him being the grumpy old man. So
he had a lot of levels, and he was a great actor. Like out of all the actors who played the Doctor, he probably had the biggest rep. He was a big film star in England before he got the role. But it's like, so you know, the thing is too about effects is that. The effects in the 60s look bad when they were in the 70s, the 70s and the 80s, and the effects today are going to look terrible to anyone watching. Like, let's assume the show either continues on.
Like the premiere of 2005 with Eccleston, that was pretty sad.
Yeah. Well, the first half of the Eccleston season is pretty hard to watch.
And yet, 5 years ago, and this is how fast things move, not 5 years, what is it now? 8 years, or whatever it is now. It was at the time you're going, wow, that's amazing effects on a TV budget. And it always has been. So it's kind of thing, it's relative. So if you're watching it now, and I don't know if anyone there would have any interest, but the original series, if you can look past the fact that it's 1960s TV, like say that you're watching something like The Twilight Zone, it's made in its time, but it is so imaginative and it's so daring and it tries to do everything. And you talked about being educational. My two favorite companions, I'd say my favorite is... Sarah Jane. But if you think who the best companions were probably the first two, Ian and Barbara.
Yeah.
They were teachers.
So the idea of they never, it was supposed to be educational, but never beat you over the head with it. So they had a history teacher. So whenever they went into the past, could contextualize what they were doing. So they went to visit the Aztecs, or they went to visit, you know, the Old West, or the French Revolution, or whatever it was.
Or even the first series was going back to
Marco Polo.
Area.
Yeah. Or, you know, Marco Polo and all these things. They had someone to contextualize it. And when there was the science stuff, they had a science teacher. And they would kind of throw that stuff in there. And very subtly...
And the Doctor was set up... Sorry, he was established as a scientist himself. Not just, like... In the early days, we didn't really know the nature of who he was, but he was very clearly a scientist of some kind. And some sort of... I mean, they kind of, like... They didn't give away what or who he was, because I don't think they even really had any idea, but they kept saying that he's some sort of inventor or, you know, mad scientist or something. And
from the beginning, he was some kind of alien. They knew he was not of the planet Earth.
Speaking of that, actually, the one thing that always got me, because I started watching the series and I had no idea. I was house-sitting for somebody. And they're like, watch whatever you want. And I was like, well, I've heard a lot of this Doctor Who character, and they seem to have the whole series on there, so I started watching it, and I had no idea about the regeneration thing. And so suddenly I get to the end of the Christopher Eccleston, and it's like, oh, he's gone? Oh, and what? And then
But that in itself is such a brilliant way to overcome the problem of, first of all, you got an aging actor who is just sick, and, you know, the behind the scenes docudrama that they showed that he was, you know, his memory was failing him, and he was having a hard time on set remembering lines or focusing, and it was getting really difficult to work with him. Not because he was a difficult person to work with, just...
Although there was indication he was difficult, but he was still,
he's aging, and, you know, your memory fails you, and
it becomes a terrifying thing for an actor, because your memory goes and you can't act.
No, I've been on stage with somebody who forgot this very important monologue, and it was all, it's
terrible. You've been on stage with it too. It's the worst
terrible
thing. It's death for an actor.
So they've started developing this idea. They developed this idea of, well, why don't we just... We're going to replace him, but why don't we make it the same guy and just build into this alien species this sort of idea that they just kind of change.
It's
it's a
evolved
way
too.
of cheating death.
Yeah.
They
And
didn't
the
even call
first-
it regeneration.
yeah.
I can't remember what they called it at first, but
The first time it happened, they don't really call it. It's just all of a sudden he pops up, and it's actually his clothes had changed too. And it was like, and I'm sure, if you can imagine, like it was a very popular show back then, and people loved William Hartnell's Doctor. He was a great Doctor, and basically everything, like we said, everything Doctor Who is now is in those first few episodes. Like everything it does is in there. But then he changes. And he's gone, and someone else is there. And if you are, and they don't have a bit where they really, they don't explain it too much. You're just basically all these traumatized children whose hero has just disappeared has to deal with it. And it's a funny thing because it still happens. Because my first regeneration was John Pertwee into Tom Baker.
yeah.
And so that's 3 to 4. And then Tom Baker was the Doctor for so long. For my
7 years, I think,
7
something like
years.
that.
So that whole period where he is your hero, and he was bits where he went from being really silly to really dramatic, and he could basically over that period he changed so much, and you can.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a Doctor whose tenure encapsulated so many different types of telling the story, from being really silly to being really serious to being really graphic to being last year really science based. So he was like your hero. You loved him. And I watched his regeneration story, and this is a great thing about back then, is I really wish you could have this happen now, having no idea it was his last story.
There was no internet to
No one
sort
to
of leak anything.
No one to leak at the fact that this guy, especially here living in Canada, if I lived in the United Kingdom, I might have heard it on the news.
Yeah.
So you're watching it, and I do remember that episode, which is a wonderful, horrible one all at the same time. That's often a lot of the Doctor's ones. The last ones are not the best. But there's always something emotional that works.
Yeah.
And watching it, and then all of a sudden he's gone, and you're like, you're traumatized. Then you go, oh, but it's that guy I really like from All Creatures Great and Small. And you go, oh, I know that actor. And then it goes on, and I end up loving the Doctor. I know most people love Tom Baker. I love the guy after him more.
Yeah,
and then I
me too.
watch his era, and I love his Doctor, even though it's a kind of a very...
I feel like the Fifth Doctor doesn't get enough credit for... Especially he had to follow the most popular Doctor. And he
Was
did
that
such
the
a
guy
good
with
job.
the celery?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Although it's happened when they've all had to follow big acts. Like when Patrick Troughton started, he's no one's done this before. John Pertwee was a hugely popular Doctor, and then this Tom Baker guy follows, and he's a hugely popular Doctor. And then comes Peter Davison. I watched Peter Davison's last episode, and he was my favorite Doctor, and I had no idea it was his last episode. And I almost wish that people could watch it nowadays,
without knowing.
Without knowing.
Yeah.
I think that on one bit
there's
is
so much build up now to this is Matt Smith's last season.
Yeah.
But not only
this is
that,
David
within
Tennant's.
the season, they even build into, you get the feeling
Something's gonna happen.
something's building towards the ending anyways.
But even when they say, like for instance, we already warned about spoilers. But even in the 6th series of the reboot,
Yep.
and I was questioning, and you think about how is Matt, how is the Doctor going to get out of this one? Because they start the season killing him or seeing him die, and then but that they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there thinking, it would be really, really bold if they actually followed through and he actually
And I thought that's what
died.
they were doing, was they were trying to keep it a huge secret, and they kill him in the first episode, and the entire season was building towards how does he get out of this, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
I definitely thought that's where he was going. Something else I wanted to say about the regeneration from from Eccleston to Tennant.
Yeah.
I love the way they handled that because
I remember the name Peter Davison. He's my favorite Doctor.
That was for Mercenary
That
Pen.
mercenary pen.
They said that.
I absolutely said Peter Davison.
Yes. Sometimes it's just easier to say the 4th Doctor, 5th Doctor. I love the way they handled that, especially since it was the first regeneration for a lot of people. Because you had an entire new generation and a whole bunch of people who'd never seen Doctor Who before coming into it. So they
And
fall in love
everybody
with...
loving Tennant.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm talking about from Eccleston to
From
Tennant.
Eccleston to Tennant.
It was such a strange thing, because a lot of, especially North Americans who don't watch Doctor Who, having the idea of replacing an actor and acknowledging it on screen and having this sort of emotional moment of you're losing this character you love and he's about to become somebody else becomes this huge heartbreaking moment, and watching the interaction between Rose and Ten as he's trying to explain to her, no, I'm somebody different, but I'm still the same guy you love.
And there's that great line. I remember it's that bit you said says can you change back? Do you want me to? Yes. no, I can't.
Yeah,
Something
and that was
like
so
I'd be
hard.
like,
That was the moment my
that's
heart broke.
great writing.
What were you saying, Errol?
No, I can't remember. Doesn't really matter.
Okay. No, and the thing with the Eccleston one, because I didn't know about it, the first 2 episodes with Tennant, and it's funny looking back on it now because I do love Tennant, but I was sitting there going,
No, I'm
No.
not. No,
Yeah.
Forget it.
You don't want to move on.
you're
yet.
weird
Yeah.
looking to me.
Yeah.
And I went into Matt Smith the same way, thinking there's no way. I love Tennant. He's my favorite
Yeah.
doctor. And I have a thing. I keep saying this on this show and elsewhere that I think David Tennant is the perfect doctor because no matter what episode he's in, it could be the worst episode in the world. I love watching that episode because I love watching him.
The best doctors are like that. Patrick
Yeah.
Troughton, who was the second Doctor, who was amazing, like just an amazing actor. A lot of his episodes, the show became very limited under him. Like, and that's just my opinion. A lot of people love it, but it became from the bit under Hartnell. There was always this sense to be like the monsters weren't really monsters or that kind of bit. They weren't. Then they were all just monsters. All of a sudden, it was rubber-suited monsters in groups of 6 invading the home counties. But so the show became the scope, and they got rid of the historicals, which I love. So many of my favorite stories are the early historicals, where there's no monsters, there's no aliens. It's just they visited a period of time in history. And
This is when he was landlocked to Earth. You mean?
No, this is during this first season.
Okay.
The first season. So this for the first Doctor, but he was even in the worst episodes. And Tom Baker's the same way.
Yeah.
You can't take your eyes off him because he's such a magnetic Doctor. Patrick Troughton's wonderful. I'd catch a few YouTube clips if people out in radio
actually-
And there were some real stinker episodes, but it's just so much fun to watch a good doctor
Yeah.
just do his thing.
So that's actually a good segue.
yeah.
So we all like Doctor Who. There's no doubt about that. But what are the episodes that you guys know of anyway that you consider some of the weaker ones?
The weaker ones.
And
Episodes.
We're talking about the new series or all time?
Let's.
That'd take a long time, wouldn't it? I mean, we like Doctor Who, but
Yeah.
you know,
But see,
I can
honestly, that's one of the things I love about the show it's so variable week to week. Like there's some bits where you can watch something like what was it? I can't remember one where it goes so jarring. Like they actually did a Doctor Who magazine did a survey of the best Doctor Who stories and the worst, like ranked them all. And number 1 was the 5th Doctor's last story, Caves of Androzani, which is almost Shakespearean. I think I showed you that one. It's wonderful. And the worst one of all time is the episode that came right after it, which is Colin Baker's first one. So in between, so those ones broadcast right after each other. And in between those 2 episodes is all of Doctor Who. So you can see something like, I don't know, we're trying to think of the new series. Like there's one like, I'd say I thought Love and Monsters was...
Oh, that I just watched that one because I'm like, I remember it, people not liking it, but I don't remember the episode enough, and I just watched it again.
And I liked it up until like the last 50 minutes, and then I thought the last 50...
It's the stupid
The girl who's drawing the pictures?
No,
or-
No. It was the one where the guy
There's a blob who sucks
he's
in
doing a
everyone's
blog.
face. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's doing it blog style, and
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the main reason none of the Doctor's not
Daleks
in
in Manhattan. I really didn't like that
I really
one.
didn't.
I do love that
Daleks
for
in
one
Manhattan.
specific reason.
Why?
Spider-Man's in it.
What?
Oh, the guy who plays Spider-Man?
Andrew Garfield.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
that was
these-
one
I
of the
remember
first.
Andrew
I'm
I have
sorry.
a friend who says you got to watch that as a cheesy B movie thing, and I go, and that's the
No,
thing.
even
I
as a
go-
cheesy
I
B
go,
movie, I don't know, man.
And I just love how bad the American accents
Oh,
are.
they're so bad.
But there was one minute, actually, and that one made me laugh out loud, was when the guy was giving that speech, and I go, it was very a speechy speech, just, why can't we all just get along? And I thought, like, this is really cheesy, and then the Dalek just shoots him, and I go, that was a little
No,
But-
the one that everybody hates, the one with the Mr. Sucker guy, Absorption Man guy, the Doctor's not in it. Her and it's Martha. No, wait, who is it?
Rose.
With?
It's
Rose.
It is
Yeah.
Rose, right?
Yeah.
He's not in it. It's just this guy on his telling.
It's a really
stories.
good episode, and I thought the idea is really good. Like, tell what the Doctor looks like from outside.
Yeah.
I just thought it got really crass in the last few minutes.
But you have other episodes without the Doctor in it, like Blink.
Yeah.
Blink
Yeah.
is
And it works.
absolutely one of the best
Yeah.
episodes
Because you
they've
can
ever done.
feel his presence over it too.
Well, it's not so much you can
No,
feel
that-
his presence, but
they
you're
have-
interested in the story. Where
Yeah.
you're not really interested in the story
Right.
of
No, that
Absorption
but
Man.
they built a
Absorption
character
Man.
that you actually wanted to see more of. I know a lot of fans after the Sally Sparrow character in Blink, a lot of fans wanted to see more of her, and a lot of fans speculated for a long time she was going to be the next companion.
Although sometimes it's better to leave it, and I
Yeah,
would
I would agree
I would
with
argue as far as bit like I know I apologize if there's any River Song fans out there, and I thought Alec Kingston was very good, but there was that whole bit. Her first episode I thought was fantastic. And there's all this bit that somewhere in the future she will be a companion, and all this stuff that's shared. And I almost thought that stuff was better left off screen. So they kind of bit where I thought season 6 was less a episode of a series of Doctor Who and more about, here's the River Song story.
Yeah.
And there's almost a bit where the Doctor ends up being like a kind of a backstreet. And there is a bit like the character I think would have been better if there's some things you don't need to see, and there's the kind of bits like the Time War. Oh, it was the Time War. Well, it's almost kind of better if it's something like noises off, because your realization of it is almost never going to be as good as what's in your mind.
Like the Clone Wars.
Oh,
Good
yeah.
grief. I always thought the Clone Wars must have been some amazing thing.
Yeah.
And then
And
we got
it
the
wasn't.
Clone Wars.
But I want to
politics with puppets.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to go back to, you're making the point about regeneration, and I think this is one thing that I really love sorry to go off what you were saying, but when Tennant left, because I loved Eccleston, but you kind of knew apparently his leaving was announced right after his first episode.
And he wasn't happy from the beginning, so...
Yeah.
But when Tennant left, I was really excited because here's a Doctor who's become popular. And it'd been the first time since Peter Davison that a Doctor that had become popular and had become entrenched in the role, because Colin Baker lasted a season and a half and was kicked off, and when the show just kind of petered out under Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann gets one episode and that's it. Eccleston's only there for one season. Here's a Doctor who has been there a long time and gained a lot of goodwill, and now he's leaving, so his regeneration is going to be meaningful.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be people who are going to feel traumatized that he's going, and then there's this new guy. But the one thing, when it's done right, and I think it's been done right every time in the new series, which is always a big relief, because if you get it wrong and you cast the wrong actor, the show's sunk.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
right.
you have a bit where you think, oh, David Tennant's gone, who's this new guy? And then as soon as the new guy starts, you're really excited to see the new guy.
And then
Matt Smith. I loved Matt Smith.
His first episode is still one of my favorites because
Me too.
There's an adventure in
the
there.
Atraxi?
No.
No, it's
That's the girl
it's
with-
beginning
sorry,
to crack
yeah,
in the
yeah,
wall.
yeah.
But it's just him and the little girl interacting with each other. There doesn't need to be there is a mystery, but the mystery's it's almost irrelevant because your entire focus in that episode is watching him interact with this young Amy Pond and just fish fingers and custard and all this ridiculous food stuff going on. It's just so whimsical and funny.
Errol and I were talking.
It made me fall in
about
love with Matt Smith immediately.
It was great. Yeah.
And Errol and I were talking about it earlier because Errol, you love the end bit where he gives his huge speech to the Atraxi, was it?
Oh, that's the second? No,
No,
that
it's
is
the
the first
one.
episode.
Yeah.
And it's when he's introducing himself as the Doctor, and you see it cycle through
The
faces
11.
of the previous Doctors, and he just passes through them, and it's like wow, and with that music in the background, and it's
It was really. It actually is like, and as a person who's watched like the show for, God, like 35 years or something, and seen all of it, that's right up there because they did. And when people want to join into the show, I think that's one of the best places to jump off because there's no tie to anything else. Like there's no.
It's a fresh start.
It's a really fresh start, and it's wonderful. And I think that
I
remember. I don't think I've ever enjoyed an episode on first transmission because I'm older now, and you guess it's harder to capture that kind of energy you get when you're a kid watching it.
Yeah.
On that point, when I watched Matt Smith's last episode, I was up in Thunder Bay I was up with my wife at her family, and I wanted to see the episode, but you don't want to impose it on other people.
No, I was watching it secretly downstairs away from the rest of my family.
So it's like and despite the fact that almost everyone I know, my family is all big fans. If I'm home at Christmas, we always would, the whole family, my nieces, my brother, we'd all watch the episode. But this is not my family.
Yeah.
And so everyone went to bed and I go, well, I could watch it. And Sarah tried to stay up and watch it with me and she fell asleep. But I'm sitting there, and this was one thing I loved I liked the episode, I didn't like the episode, but there was a lot that I did enjoy. I'm watching it I'm sitting down, cross-legged in front of the TV. It's all dark out, and I'm just watching it almost face to the TV, just like I used to do when I was a 5-year-old. And watching that bit where you think and that kind of sense that this Doctor I really love is going away. And I go, that's a really great thing where you can have. I'm middle-aged man now, and the show when it's done right can still make you feel give those little kid feeling. And 11th Hour gave me that kind of little kid feeling, that bit about the joy the show has, the exuberance it has, the imagination it has. And when it's done great, you can watch it as an adult and still feel that feeling you did when you're watching it as a kid.
And that's why I like Miyazaki, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But I agree with Errol that moment at the end, it solidified Matt Smith for me, not just as, okay, he's this wacky, whimsical character, but you actually got to watch him literally step into the role of Doctor Who, because as you were saying, he was doing that cycling through, first through 10th Doctor and showing the entire history and scope of the character. And then he walks right through the hologram, and it's, yes, this is our Doctor. This is the new Doctor, and I accept him as the Doctor. Because there's a great build-up before that of him, finding his costume and the entire, the manic way that Matt Smith does everything. He's cycling through all these clothes, and there's great little character bits of, he pulls off his pants, and Amy kind of makes this, ooh, little bit in the background, and it made me laugh. And the music, that theme that they come up with immediately hooks you in, and it just builds this beautiful crescendo of, yes, I am the Doctor.
And when he walked, and I think the bit that got me, and this is a weird thing, and this is, I guess, it indicates the eccentricity of the character, is when after that he goes and he runs because the TARDIS is there, and it's a beautiful new blue, and he stands in front and goes, "What have you got from this time?" And the moment that I love the most is when he puts his key in the lock, and it's a creaky old wooden door. And this is one thing that you think about, is all the sci-fi shows, there's often this sense of portentousness, or the sense of dystopias or things like that. Here's a guy who's time machine. You get into his time machine by sticking a key in a creaky old wooden door. He steps inside, and here's this magical cabinet.
There's nothing gritty about Doctor Who.
That moment solidifies what Doctor Who is in just one line and one action. But all the little nuance of everything that's going on. That perfectly sums up the show, that one line of, "What have you got for me now?"
Yeah.
And then that, like you said, the creaky door, because it's an old show, but it's brand new, it's different. You've got a new guy who's stepping into this beautiful room that, the show is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. There's so much metaphor in that.
And it's also bigger than one person, too, which is important to see. Because you had a Doctor who was so popular and did a wonderful job of connecting with people. And, as a fan of the show, I would be walking into regular stores and seeing Doctor Who merchandise, which was, I couldn't get my head around it. Because to me, it was this weirdo show that I watched as a kid.
I remember episodes of The Simpsons where they made fun of Doctor Who fans or something, and it's...
So we thought it was this weird kind of thing, and there it is, it's become really popular, and then it's all new again. It's not really, because, you can, that they've done these kind of stories before, and they will do them again, but when they have that they get it right, it feels like it's brand new. And it felt brand new, a brand new show, when Matt Smith took over in those first episodes. And I'm thinking, hopefully it will again. Peter Capaldi is an amazing actor, and I loved Matt Smith's Doctor. And
it'll be interesting to see what he does.
And then, foosh, Matt Smith is gone, and here's Peter Capaldi, and again I got the feeling, I can't wait to see what he's going to do.
What is he going to do? It'll be interesting.
And it could be completely different. It could, because the one thing that there wasn't a lot of tonal change between Matt Smith and David Tennant, and I get the sense maybe they will. I don't know. Maybe Moffat can't do it. But here's a bit where the show can radically change, and it has radically changed. Could gain fans, could lose fans. But it'd be interesting to see what they do, because you can do whatever you want now.
They did disappoint me in one way, though, changing from Smith to Capaldi.
Yeah.
He's still not a ginger.
They gotta keep up the joke, though. I have a question, actually, Andrew. So I'm just curious, because one of my favorite companions is Donna. And I'm just curious about the classic series, because in the new series, I know pretty much almost all of the companions were in love with the Doctor at some point.
Never ever happened in the old series.
And that's one of my biggest beefs about the new series.
Although it depends on how it goes, because I don't think it's a bad idea to touch on it or explore it. I think it became too much of a thing, but I don't know. It's the one thing that Doctor Who is now. I guess it is. I'm basing on my nothing but personal observation. It used to be a show that was mostly a boys' show, and now there's a romantic element that's in there. And I know just as many girls who are fans of the show, and maybe it's because that aspect is there.
I don't think so.
I hope not.
I think they put the romantic thing in there because they thought it would attract more girls to the show.
Maybe, yeah.
And in their defense, a little bit.
I think Zoe likes the romantic.
Does she like the romantic
She's
stuff?
9 though, but yes.
To be fair, if this weird whimsical man comes down in a blue magic box and shows you
Everything.
all of time and space and all this wonderful adventure,
And let's just
everybody kind of falls in love
Don't
with
worry,
him.
Kari. Don't worry, Kari. I'm representing us.
say, yeah.
It
Romance
doesn't.
does not equal
Yeah.
attraction.
And you know what? That's
Yeah.
fantastic. That's good. I'm glad to hear that because it's, and even if it is, that's not a bad thing. But it's, I don't know. It's the idea. The one thing is, when people say, "Well, it never was in the old series, so it shouldn't be in the new one." Well, maybe, but not necessarily, because there's a lot of things that were in the old series that don't make it to the new series. I think it's just because they didn't, like, it's say like it was a British show in the '60s, and the British would joke that they're never the best at expressing their emotions. I love Donna. I actually say, from my perspective, I love Donna because Donna was just a friend of the Doctor traveling with him, and I thought that was so refreshing.
And
I thought Martha,
I like that too.
Martha got such a bum rap because
Thank you
so
so much.
I thought she was. I remember, here's a character. She's a doctor,
Yep.
and she's independent. And her first few episodes are fantastic.
But
then she's turned out to be like, she's presented as like, oh, you're not Rose. And I thought
Yeah.
that Rose thing. I think the one thing that, if I could have a criticism of the new series, it's that used to be something ended and you moved on.
Yeah.
A friend would leave and it was traumatic, but the Doctor didn't spend time mourning Sarah. Or, well, he did mourn Joe a little bit, but it's like, it would move on. And because...
And I'm sure the one companion, I can't remember his name, the kid on the ship.
Adric. Who ended
up
Everyone
dying.
hated Adric at the time. But it's like,
I didn't know they
There
hated
was a
him.
kid companion?
yeah, he was one of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be a genius. He was on a ship that...
Same thing,
yeah.
Mercenary Pen.
Yeah.
What's it say?
Angel Islington and never.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he was,
yeah.
And who's the person who said, like... and you know what, Carrie? I agree. I'm glad to hear that's not the case. Because,
Kari.
it's...
Kari, yeah.
okay?
About romance.
About romance.
Yeah.
Because I think there's nothing wrong with having it there.
There's nothing wrong with it, but there needs to be a good reason.
And there has to be a good reason. And I thought they got to the point where,
And it just takes over so many companion storylines. Like, that was my big problem with Martha. I thought Martha was established as such an interesting character.
Absolutely.
And just got sidetracked by this whole I'm in love with the Doctor thing, and I'm so obsessed with the Doctor.
Yeah.
My character's completely irrelevant.
Now, that
after a
being
while.
said, though, I did like her exit. Because
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
because
I thought she had
she's
a
one of the
great
few
idea.
companions to just say, "This isn't healthy for me. I need to walk away and do something else."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have all this bit where it's like and maybe this is what I'm come from. I see this with Clara too. It's just a person who likes traveling with it because it's an adventure.
Now,
And you
But
don't.
unfortunately, even her character's got kind of it
But
became
there's-
so tied into she's someone's like that's something that we said this last week that bugs me about the way Tennant rates, especially female
Moffat,
characters.
Moffat?
Sorry, Moffat. Sorry, Tennant. Derp. The way he rates the female companions, it tends to be more about how integral they are to the big storyline that they're trying to do right now, as opposed to actually building up a person and a character.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this a couple weeks ago after one of the episodes that we all kind of agreed that while there's things we love about Clara, there isn't enough about her to actually be a person yet. And it's so kind of tied into her being that someone special that is tied into the Doctor's past that she's almost inconsistent in who she is sometimes. And it bugs me because I really like the actress and I really like her performance.
But that will be enough. That will be enough because the old series was nefarious for this. Is where you introduce a character with a backstory, and the character was X, Y, and Z, and within 20 minutes, they become generic female companion, and then they succeed and fail based on the charm of the individual actor or actress, mostly an actress, and their connection with the Doctor, and that's usually what worked. So Claire is not.
Kari brings up a good point. She says every one of Clara's alter egos has been more interesting. Actually, Errol was saying because she reminded you of Mary Poppins, like the governess thing, like being like she's practically perfect in every way.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Well, it's like kind of like the old manic pixie dream girl kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like-
and
it's
that's
like-
exactly what
so,
they're doing.
So River I thought was less of a character than more kind of like a the Mary Sue character thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like Moffat writing himself, it's a weird thing, writing himself into that kind of bit of like this incredible.
he just wants to marry the Doctor.
Yeah, and that's what it is. There's a general bit too. Is like it's a weird thing where you have the people writing the show now and this is Russell T Davies as well, grew up as huge fans of the Doctor, where the Doctor is a big hero to them, like a childhood hero. And so there's almost that.
There's a reverence given
There's
to
a
him.
reverence where it's like he's not a character. As the people who wrote, and maybe this is a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but the people who wrote him in the past, he was a character that they had been commissioned to write a script on. Moffat and RTD and a lot of the people nowadays are writing it, like Mark Gatiss especially, are writing it as, I got a chance to play, like write a script. Like I wanted, when I was a kid and I was 5 years old and I was writing stories, now I get to do it for real.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you can't do it, because like it's like you say you wanted to dream to be shortstop for the New York Yankees, and you work really hard.
Ja-Mez would be a Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't write Spider-Man for that reason, because I wouldn't be able to separate my love of Spider-Man and my adoration of Spider-Man for what he needs to be as a character. And
Or you could. You might be able to. Like it's
And
a
then
hard
Spider-Man visited a guy named Ja-Mez, and he became his sidekick.
Or the 5-year-old
awesome.
is like, and then Spider-Man fought a bunch of dinosaurs. You know, it's like,
Well, they had that episode of Doctor Who.
yeah.
You know
Dinosaurs.
what's funny? Speaking of Moffat, what I noticed from when he did all his shows at the beginning is that every time he wrote a show, there'd be a child in it.
Yep. And still is. Like,
Yes,
often,
yeah. I was looking, oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
Why
Amy
they always
Pond started as a child, and that was...
But the empty child, didn't he do the empty child?
He did
Yeah.
do the empty child.
There's
yeah.
a child.
And the
with,
girl in the girl in the
Girl in the
fireplace.
Fireplace.
Family of Blood. That's another one that has kids
Library,
Yeah.
child, whatever.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, the
that's,
kids. So
wow, I didn't even think about that.
It's interesting thing, and I've loved all those episodes, but there's
Yeah.
since where he seems to think where it's like, I guess that's the bit. If you're trying to connect, I don't know how well this works. Like when you were a kid, were you more drawn to shows that had
I
a
did.
kid?
I was.
I
Totally
can't
was.
remember.
Yeah, and I think maybe there's something to that.
So you're saying you didn't like season 6 and 7 as much?
Yeah, and I think the reason I didn't like although I view things kind of from a sanguine point of view, because I've been a fan for all this time, and the show goes in waxes and wanes. So there's bits where my favorite bit was, I loved when the first Tom Baker seasons were amazing. And they're still very good because they're based on, this idea of dark psychology. They're really, really well done. And then the years after that I didn't like very much at all. Some people really do. When Douglas Adams ends up being, script editor for a season, and the show.
And I love that he was on the show, because he's one of my favorite writers.
Have you ever seen, actually, it's one of the favorite episodes of everyone who's worked on Doctor Who since, is one called City of Death, which Douglas Adams wrote.
I'll have to look that one up.
And it's a lot of fun. Again, it's very 1970s, but it's so clever. But it goes back and forth. So when you have a bad season of the new series, it's like, well, Doctor Who's been like that before. And then usually before too long, the lead writer goes and the actor goes and something else changes. And eventually Moffat will leave and someone else will take over who might have a completely different
I think
idea.
Moffat might be getting to the end of his run.
I'm surprised he didn't leave with Smith.
Yeah, that's usually the way it goes.
Because he's kind of wrapped up his story the way he was building it. Now, we're kind of coming towards the end of the episode, and we did want to talk a little bit more about the special specifically, because they're a little more recent. They're,
And also, I'm curious, actually, now that Errol's finished all of the series and that, like, what you thought overall, having binged on it pretty much.
Well, one thing, as I said, the one thing I liked about it, and this guy, Andrew Dundass, was talking. There's so many names popping up, and that I like the family aspect of it. That I can sit there with my family and watch it. And yes, sometimes some of it will utterly suck.
Yeah, but it has to, because it's ambition. It's one of those.
Ambition
is so big. It's like you're going to fall flat in your face.
Yeah,
and
it's the Top Gear line.
Yes.
Ambitious but rubbish.
Yeah, and the fact that it can be great and suck is not a thing that I think is bad. It's something that's wonderful about it, because
They can keep trying.
They can keep trying. And if many things I'd say, like you talked about 6 or 7, is like season 6 I didn't like, but it tried something. It tried for the first time to be a really cohesive one. I thought it didn't work because
I couldn't get into
because everything was a cheat. The Doctor dies, only he doesn't.
Yes.
And River is his wife and his killer, only she isn't.
Yeah.
And he's Amy and Rory's daughter, even though there's never shown any on-screen connection. So it's a really bold idea that fell down in execution, and I can forgive that, because
and I kind of liked. I thought it was kind of cute.
Yeah.
So, but there are a lot of things like, for example, here. For example, the biggest threat to the universe are the Daleks, but they haven't taken over anything.
Yeah.
now
That's because everybody lives upstairs.
Yeah.
There are millions of them now,
Yeah.
right? Even though he was
They've
apparently
been
wiped out.
They're
extinguished.
wiped out.
There are now millions of them, and yet
They're like cockroaches. You can't. You
can't
leave
get rid
one
of
and
them.
they'll breed.
They breed, and
That's because they need to pay the Terry
they're
Nation
feared by
family.
everybody, but for some reason they haven't taken over every race.
I'm tempted, actually. I was telling Errol this. I'm tempted to do a skit
Yeah.
because I was rewatching the series again, and I was watching. I think it was close to David Tennant's end, where it was like all the people came back. It was this end of series 4,
Yeah.
and
Or end of
and they were
series
like
7.
Yeah.
revealing. They're like somebody is trying to communicate, and so they like put the patch through, and then you just hear like the exterminate, and you see everybody looking terrified. I'm like, I want the one person to stand next to the doctor and be like,
We got this.
I thought you destroyed them. Like, oh no, the last time was the absolute last time that they got destroyed.
There's one thing in the old series that I really liked when the Daleks were a bit where it was almost like the Doctor always kind of came in where the Daleks had taken over a planet, and it was just like, oh geez, I'm going to have to deal with this because the Daleks were like always...
Yeah.
And... it's kind of changed a bit since then, but it was always that. I always loved the episodes where you got the sense that you were just stepping into one bit of the Daleks being really evil and taking over the planet-y kind of thing.
Yeah, I would have been interested to see if they had ended the Daleks when they reintroduced them. It was in Eccleston's run when they had the one Dalek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow,
Which is still one of my favorite episodes.
They were
Yeah.
like really building up this thing. I'm like, it would have been interesting if he had died, and that was the end of it.
But they're too popular. It's like
They're too popular.
And
Well, not only
it's a lot of the worst episodes in the new series and the old series have always been the ones with a returning monster, like the Cybermen or the Daleks, or
Cybermen,
but it's because it's
Cybermen have been terrible in these
yeah,
series.
they were terrible in the old series too.
Really?
They're a great idea. Like
Yeah,
actually, there might be the best Doctor Who monster in concept, but they're never really that good in realization. But that's fine because it's like entry points. When I was a kid, some of the episodes I loved the most are now ones I look back on, and I only liked them because the Daleks were in them, and you watch them, and they're awful. But from a kid's standpoint, you get to see the scary monster. So that's one of the bits from the family bit. Is like,
Well, I would say my kids aren't scared of Cybermen or Daleks.
Yeah.
Because they're not that scary, really. They're exterminate, and they don't seem to do anything. As Amanda said, I've really only seen the Daleks kill 20 people. Actually.
yeah.
They haven't really killed that many people.
Well, the problem with the Daleks is the same problem I have with the Weeping Angels, where the Weeping Angels were introduced, they were freaking scary, they were awesome, and then they just kind of got overused. And
But that's what you do. It's like it's
yeah.
going
no,
to happen
I
because
get that, but at the same time, it's like I really wish they had have just left the Weeping Angels alone to be in that one episode to be freaking scary, and then never use them
Christmas
again.
special. Let's talk
Okay.
about one
Oh,
quick
yeah.
thing about the Christmas special. They land Weeping Angels. Oh, escape! Go back. The Weeping Angels are gone. There was a horde of them, which is dangerous. But oh no, we're back in the town.
Yeah.
Weeping Angels can't figure out how to get in there.
Yeah.
So there was, and that was probably the big problem I had with this. The
Can
Christmas special. All the enemies are like pansies now.
Yeah.
Or like the Doctor can get rid of all of them with a stick.
yeah, I think there's that bit where it goes back to the idea we're talking about, where the Doctor becomes kind of too godlike, and I can forgive some stuff because at the end of the year, but where all of a sudden his regeneration energy just destroys
Destroys the world.
Yeah.
To take down a Dalek ship.
Yeah, and I thought it was just changing his body, but now he's got laser beam hands. And it's kind of things where I think examples are you can do things like that, but you have to be really judicious how you use them. I'll give an example, and this is one thing I've thought Moffat has kind of gotten wrong, is use too much time paradoxes. We can use it every once in a while, it's interesting, but when it's used all the time, it stops being interesting.
Yeah.
And I always thought one of the worst things you can do, because at the core of this show, he's got a time machine. So if he's got a time machine, in theory, he could go back and fix his own mistakes.
Which is why I like the episode Father's Day, because they showed why he can't do that. But
yeah, so it's the idea of saying that, but then you see him doing that
Yeah.
all the time under Moffat. So it's like
All the time.
you had a bit where in Father's Day, and Father's Day is a wonderful episode
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
uses the narrative of the show to tell a story. Like, who wouldn't want to go back and see someone that they love, that they lost,
yeah.
one more time? Everyone knows what that feels like.
And it shows the consequences of, there's certain things that I can't do. I have this time machine. I can't just go back and change anything I want.
Yeah.
But
But then you have a bit, and I thought...
Yeah, and that's my problem.
And season 5 is one of my favorites, but it ended on what I thought was one of the most a horrible narrative.
Oh, Errol
cheat.
had issues with that.
Horrible narrative cheat is that you lock the doctor in a box that he can never escape from. How does he get out of it? Well, he uses his little time machine to go back and unlock it for himself. And I go like,
and that was one of the most convoluted episodes.
Oh, and it's a flying prison too.
So it's this bit where you can like you have to be really careful because you have the capacity in a time travel show to undermine every narrative device. And the key narrative thing is that A has to lead to B, and there has to be consequences what happened from A to B. And if you use it without not judiciously, which I think Moffat has done a bunch of times, with we're talking about season 6 is where he sets up a horrible thing in the first episode and then gets out of all of it. So if you have this bit where there's never a consequence to your narrative decisions,
it just doesn't matter anymore.
It doesn't matter anymore.
And that's people's problems with Moffat is that there's no sense of finality to his episode. He does something where he kills off a character, but within a couple episodes, there's something to bring him back.
Oh yeah, it's like
how many times did you bring back Rory?
Jenny.
Or River, or
River, or the Doctor himself.
And so there's a bit about leaving toys in the boxes, and I think this is a problem with this series. And again, I love this series, and it has flaws. Doctor Who has always had flaws, and I always think its strengths are better than its flaws. So even if season 7 wasn't that fantastic, it's still, at its worst, it's still more interesting than any other show out there, and I still believe that. But you have to be, so the flaws are there, but it's like, don't mess around with narratives.
No, it's like I'm gonna build a prison. I'm gonna make sure it's able to fly and heal people, though.
Yeah,
because that makes sense.
Like there's a lot of magic wands.
Yeah,
Rose. If Rose had left, this is one thing. Like Rose's leaving, I thought that was so well handled.
Yeah.
So it's like she's locked away, and you're saying goodbye. And then she comes. Then
they ruin it by bringing.
They bring her back, and they give her a blow-up doctor to like go back to her universe. And so you have
a bit that so much.
Or let's say like when at the end of Father's Day, one of the most beautiful moments is where he says, "I've had all these extra bits," and he decides to the father dies for Rose.
Yeah.
And then they don't bring that character back, but they kind of do.
Hello,
and so it's like
alternate dimension father here.
Well, yeah,
and so it's
you can have whatever you want in this show, and it's like,
but you should just because you can. Again, the Jurassic Park doesn't mean you should.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
we can agree with you there.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a bit where if I have a criticism of the show, it's like when a character is gone or a moment is gone, leave it there. Like, or just like so. If I remember, like Amy and Rory had that their goodbye in the God Complex was one of my favorite new series moments because it was so adult and so wonderful, and it was a heartbreaking goodbye, and it felt exactly like Sarah's goodbye in back when she left the Fourth Doctor.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah.
And so you have that, and then he says, "I'm leaving you here because I don't want something bad to happen to you, and I know that it's going to happen to you." And then the next season, he starts carting him around and gets in a situation where something bad happens to him. So he ends up, you undermine a beautiful moment. You gave them a victory lap that they didn't need.
Yeah.
And I love both characters. And you end up making the character look like a goof, the doctor look like a goof who doesn't have the courage of his own convictions to leave them to lead an ordinary life, which I thought was beautiful. And then there's all this convoluted stuff afterwards.
I do love that now that they've written them out of the series and given sort of a, well, I mean, they gave a Rose an out that they couldn't break, but I mean, they've given them an out that they can't really break. I love the fact that they haven't come back except for that one moment at the end of...
Oh, but that worked.
No, and it's not her coming back. It's completely his memory of his final moment. Yeah. And it's to me the exact same thing of Tennant going through and seeing all of his former companions. It was just this heartfelt goodbye moment. And it's just sort of... I like it better because it's in his head and it's just sort of this one last reminder
Tennant
of...
had to say goodbye to everybody.
But Tennant is the character who would do that.
Yeah.
So
and the fourth Doctor on, they've always seen visions of their companions as they're regenerating.
Oh,
so
cool.
it's a normal thing.
Yeah.
But I just thought, let's like have a goodbye and stick to it. Because if that was the last time I ever saw two characters I really loved in Amy and Rory in the God Complex, I would have loved it.
Yeah.
I thought everything in the first part of season 7 didn't work because it didn't make emotional sense, and you're just basically leading them. You had a heartbreaking goodbye. But then you had to lead it to a bigger heartbreaking goodbye,
Yeah.
and the heartbreaking goodbye was too over the top
Oh,
because you had
it's
to.
like, all right, now they're definitely
Because
gone.
you had all this bits where they jump off the bridge, off the building, go, oh, there's your goodbye, and then you keep piling on, and if you keep hitting people over the head with an emotional mallet, eventually it just feels like you're getting hit over the head.
I would say that
By the way, guys, we're going 10 minutes.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
I would say
I'm
this
excited.
for Rory and Amy. Their reason for splitting up dumbest reason.
Stupid, yeah. It's like, okay, here's the
We're
thing.
married.
Yeah,
We know.
exactly. You're married to someone, and that I remember thinking that was a cheat too.
Yeah.
It's again to get like I like that episode,
It
but
was
it's like
unnecessary conflict.
yeah, because it's like you're trying to build a. It's like if you had a bit where you had been impregnated by this alien, like as like to create and. They had the baby taken from you, and the guy had lived 2,000 years, which is still crazy. 2,000 years protecting her in a box, and she had pulled him from an alternative universe to like when he was dead. And you can't have a baby, and you can't talk about it.
No, I agree with
and
you.
you can't adopt. Like I just thought, like that was like I remember thinking like this is stupid. So everything about and again loving Amy.
Who wrote that episode?
Everything Moffat.
Yeah, it's like doesn't Moffat? Isn't he married?
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't talk to his wife. I don't know.
But that's some of the argument that people have about Moffat is he wrote some of the best episodes of the Russell T Davies series, but unto himself. And I still defend him that I love his overarching plot ideas better than Russell T Davies' sort of the Bad Wolf where he just ham-fisted into each episode. I like the fact that he's trying to create these overarching plots.
Oh, I like
they
those
don't
too.
end up working out in the end, but he I don't understand.
He needs somebody reining him in,
I
actually.
think in all the cases, in both cases with Moffat and Russell T Davies, I think both of them are excellent writers based on everything else that they've done. Like they've done wonderful work outside of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I think they've done great work in Doctor Who. But I think when you're writing too many episodes, there's a tendency. I always got the sense that it should have always gone through another draft.
Moffat.
Although the interesting thing is that and they're talking about this in the chat is that like Douglas Adams sometimes starts to rewrite stories, and you don't feel that Moffat or Russell T Davies. I mean, they do a little bit, but they aren't repeating themselves too much.
I find Moffat is really repeating himself.
Now I think so, right?
And early on. But I'm actually the opposite as far as the series things, because I always thought, and maybe this is just how I saw Doctor Who, Doctor Who used to be the Doctor lands somewhere. There is a conflict, you go through the conflict is resolved, he moves on to another story.
It's like the littlest hobo.
Yeah, just like, there's a voice, keeps on calling me.
Down
you were
the
here.
road, that's where I long to be.
You weren't here 2 weeks ago when we went over this. That we were talking about the X-Files, and I have a problem with series that are just episodic. I can't follow very episodic shows. I really lose interest, and that's why I had a hard time with that, because the episodes that were very plot oriented weren't that great, but all the monster episodes I don't have any interest in, and that's why I didn't like the Russell T Davies series as much, because it was very episodic, and that loses me.
Because I'm the opposite. Because I think there's a tendency.
But Moffat's been dropping the ball on that, and I do have a problem with the way he's executing them. So
because the show is, the shows nowadays used to be most shows were self-contained. Like they
were built for syndication, because that's where you made your money.
But any show, like you look at any show, even dramas, they usually had a reset. Like there weren't often it wasn't usually arcs. Like, and this is a modern TV thing where they built arcs. And Doctor Who, when it came back, you tried to fall into that. I actually liked having a bit, though I understand, because you can go anywhere at any time. You can have something completely arresting and interesting every week if you write it properly.
Yeah.
You don't need to have the series arc, and I actually kind of liked what I called like the kind of gentle arcs of the Russell T Davies area, because you'd have one or two mentions of it, like they say the Saxon stuff or whatever.
The Saxon stuff was better than the Bad Wolf stuff, I will admit.
But the Bad Wolf stuff, you just mentioned it a few times, and then at the end, there's a revelation.
Yeah.
And the reason I like that is because it doesn't interfere with any of the episodes leading up to it.
Or the bees.
Yeah, the bees stuff. So I personally felt that every Russell T Davies series enders were ridiculous, and often I felt they were like, holy fuck, like what was the one, the Stolen Earth, or the last one?
My gosh.
I go like, this is like everything is being thrown in this. This is like he vomited everything in the series history on one episode. But it didn't matter, because if the end of the series wasn't that good, it didn't retroactively cause any of the previous episodes to be weak, because the previous episodes were in and of themselves standalone.
Yeah.
So if they just had one bit where they mentioned Bad Wolf for 2 seconds, you go like, okay, and then they go on to the rest of the episode, or Saxon, or whoever it was.
But that's what I liked about season 5 was they were laying in the seed of the crack in the wall, but it didn't take over the episodes. It would just show up every once in a while.
I did like the Weeping Angel when it was the future Doctor that talked to Amy. Remember?
Yeah.
And you were sitting
there.
That was
nice.
That was
water.
And I remember at the time I thought like,
but that's what I mean by Moffat building in these things about like that.
I like that. That was
cool.
cool.
But let's say it's like, for example, and that was real. I remember thinking that and going, I remember when I realized at the time, I go, oh, that's a Doctor from the future. And I go,
It's not
that's
the same
beautiful.
Doctor.
And I go, oh, Moffat's in charge now, and his brilliant mind has set this huge jigsaw. It's not going to work. And then when he gets to the end of the puzzle, he fumbles the puzzle.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing.
It's like he has the last piece, and then he realizes it doesn't quite fit, and he mashes it in there anyway.
Yeah.
I think he needs someone else to help him out with these things because he builds great.
Well, it's like,
So, for example, if you have, like, let's say, at the end where it turns out that the Doctor didn't die, and River wasn't his wife and or killer, and Amy and Rory were the parents, but it didn't really matter. So then basically...
Spoilers.
Yeah, you look back on all these episodes, and the episodes in Season 6, and I've rewatched Season 6, don't resonate as well because the end... They weren't self-contained. They were part of a larger narrative, and if the larger narrative fails, a lot of the season fails. If you have something where Russell T Davies does it, if it blows up in the end, it doesn't really have any retroactive effect. And I think if you can do a really good season arc, by all means do it, but don't do it just to do one. And if you're going to do it, make sure you have
Do it well.
an end that's emotionally satisfying. I think that's the kind of thing. It needs less to be satisfying from a plot standpoint than to be emotionally satisfying because the end of time, Tennant's last episode, is a dog's breakfast from a plotting standpoint. It's all over the map, and yet when you have all those moments, between Bernard Cribbins and David Tennant and all that stuff,
Who might be one of my favorite companions.
yeah, he was wonderful, and it feels right. So all the stuff around the plot, it's like the God Complex, that feels like a beautiful ending. What was Angels in Manhattan doesn't. So it's like even if the plot, so there's a bit where you can try and do a clever plot, but it has to be emotionally satisfying. And I always thought that if you want to sum up both the main lead writers to this point, is Russell T Davies was really good at the emotive stuff.
he was.
Really bad at plotting.
Yeah.
And
that's where he lost
and
me.
Moffat is all about big plotting stuff, but I think intricate plotting, but misses sometimes a lot of the
ending.
the right emotional
Can
moments.
I
But
say one
he
of my
also
sticking
misses some
points for
character
that?
depth too sometimes.
This is about the Christmas episode. Sorry, I'm
I want to mention something about this too.
okay.
So
Yeah.
So one of my sticking points with the Christmas episode, which kind of relates to his emotive thing, was Clara, actually. And her complete nonchalance about seeing the Doctor age, actually. Because first she had him, 1 second when she was, trapped on the TARDIS and then arrived back and she looked a little in shock, but it was like, she sees the Doctor and he's aged 200 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And it just...
Oh, I felt that she had.
I
I
don't
saw her.
know,
I like her as an actress, even though I agree with what you're saying as a character. I think she's a very good actress.
Yeah, and that's
and
why
I
I'm
thought
so
she carried that
disappointed.
bit about just how sad it was, but I think she kind of knew that's what was going to happen, and it was just.
I guess, I don't know,
That's why
I just wanted to see a little more from her. Just a couple more moments of holy crap, what just happened?
Yeah,
And
I thought it was nicer to be quiet about it rather than a big thing. But I don't. It's. The great thing is, if you didn't like season 7, didn't like this, well, there's going to be a new Doctor, and it could be, who knows, it could be terrible, it could be wonderful.
I'm hoping that Clara will get a bit more time to build more character, and because now that we're done with the whole, she's so intertwined with Matt Smith and all the other Doctors, we have a brand new Doctor she's not had any sort of history with. Yeah. She can start completely fresh, and we can actually build a freaking female character this time.
Poops.
Anyways, I wanted. We were talking earlier about the end of the Christmas special and how he's doing the whole God thing of just destroying the Daleks with his regeneration energy, and it's just the
bright power hand, the power hands.
In contrast to that, I thought the end of I know it was super over the top too, but the end of the 50th episode, the 50th anniversary episode, I liked so much more because it was it's still the over the top emotional moment, but it's the complete opposite where it's the Doctor solving a problem by being a complete genius and just bringing
not by having laser hands.
It's the same thing we were talking about with Sherlock last week,
Which I haven't seen.
Just the end of.
That's spoilers.
No. The end of any episode that they do with Sherlock, they've tied in all these little hints throughout the way, and then just at the end of the episode, he puts the entire puzzle together for you.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's this beautiful moment of putting this entire puzzle together. But what I loved about the end of the 50th anniversary was it's not just Matt Smith putting together the puzzle. It's every Doctor working together to bring together, and it was such a nice way to cap off. This is a show that has 50 years of history, and we get to see all of these old guys again. We even get to see, for a brief glimpse of time, Eccleston again, and it was just
Yeah.
that moment. I watched it earlier today, and I'm like, the rest of the episode didn't really do much for me, which is really
I
just
liked it a lot.
it disappointed me because I love David Tennant, and David Tennant, I didn't feel like he was as strong in this episode as he has been in the past. But I love that moment because it's acknowledging 50 years of history. It's this big emotional moment of saying, this is a character with history, and this is a character that can rely on his entire history to build this moment. He's been doing the calculations to solve this problem that's been plaguing him for 4 generations now.
Although I would say it's one of those bits where honestly it's inconsistent with anything that happened in the previous, especially up to the second Doctor. But in the moment, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and
that's what I love.
Yeah, it's a great uplifting moment. And I'd say that watching that, and I had the same reaction as you did. Like that little voice in the back of your head, that's the nitpicky fan. And the nitpicky fan, I don't like the nitpicky fan, rather than the one who could just roll with it and enjoy it as a really imaginative, wonderful program.
I really have to shut him off during a lot of Doctor Who.
Yeah,
it's
true.
going to drive me
Why
crazy.
does the prison fly?
But it's because when you have, and the thing is if you have 50 years of backstory and all this kind of stuff, and even it's gonna be a mess.
Yeah.
And you could say well, why didn't this episode? Or you could say, well, you know what? Did it serve that one
The
episode?
Doctor wins, and the Doctor wins by being the Doctor. And
You know what I
love
like?
that
I will
moment.
tell what we really like. The whole part about calculating how to open the door.
Oh, that was
That's
great.
wonderful.
But
That's
even
the way it
better,
ended.
the punchline.
Yes.
The door wasn't even locked. to begin
That's
with.
what I love. The fact that it didn't matter.
And I always think that this is
But
what
they were setting up for the end
Yes,
about using his entire history
so it's
to do a calculation.
So it's smart. It's a funny moment, but it also sets up a larger plot point in the end, and that's the clever stuff. I always love the Moffat at his best. The problem is often the solution. So it's like that there. So I don't know. It's really exciting to me though. At this point, it's I love the 50th anniversary because they used all of it. Maybe now leave all that in the past and tell your stories as if it's it's a fresh blanket.
Mercenary Pen brings up, so Peter Davidson had amnesia? I forget.
All the Doctors have kind of since the third Doctor, there's always been a bit where after they've regenerated, they're
trying to develop their new personality. It's sort of like unbaked bread.
Yeah,
Well,
and Peter Davidson had a nice little bit too, where he was still. All of them have had that to a certain.
Well,
degree.
Matt Smith had the entire the first half of his first episode was him trying to. He's still in that in between stage where he's still a bit David Tennant.
But Peter Davidson had amnesia. Did they forget a lot of
It
things?
wasn't an amnesia so much as he was just I remember he had this one bit, and I love Peter Davidson as an actor, where he was kind of going through. He did little impersonations of Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell.
Fun.
And John Pertwee, not Tom Baker because he was too close. Mm-hmm. But they've had that bit. I think when Paul McGann is the Doctor, he doesn't remember anything. Yeah. So it's I like the idea. I think that one thing they've done with Regeneration in the new series is the idea that I like the idea of it's a painful and emotionally traumatic thing, because otherwise it's it's meaningless. Yeah. It's
David Tennant's last line of "I don't want to go."
If you want to use the Doctor as Christ image, right? They always say why does the Christ thing work? Is because if you believe in that kind of stuff, it's if it's not a sacrifice and it's not painful, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So it's the same thing for the Doctor. If losing his life and regenerating isn't a thing that's terrifying,
and it is essentially a death.
It's a death. If you don't make it the stakes being high, that it's painful.
It's not just a death of it's his personality dying, but it's someone that we fall in love with that's not going to be there anymore. That is essentially a character death. Yeah. It's still going to be the same person, but it's not going to be the same person, and we have to get used to someone completely different stepping into that role. So
it is like 2 hours and a half.
We're I'm just about to interrupt and wrap things up here. So we're pretty much done now. I guess what we'll end on is we could list our favorite Doctors. Because it was a question earlier in the chat, and I didn't want to address it then. I kind of wanted to.
It's so hard, I think when there's a compulsion amongst fans of things to do lists, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as the older I get, and I found this when I thought, well, where do you rank Smith? And I go I don't know where I rank Smith. I loved him, and I think as older you could say, well, he was my favorite. And Peter Davidson was my favorite. But
it's also hard when you take into consideration that guys like Tennant and Smith are also borrowing elements from previous Doctors.
Yeah.
So we can.
Tennant had a lot of 5 in him.
So we
and
can
Smith
agree
had
that
a lot
it's too
of 2
difficult.
but I'm just going to say is that I think it's enough rather than say he was the best or rank him as third or whatever. Is that he was really, really good, and I really enjoyed him. And I felt that about, with the exception of I hate to say pick on Colin Baker, but with the exception of Colin Baker, like I just like you go after every doctor and go like, you know, I liked what he was doing. And I think that we've been really spoiled in the new series. It's so important to have a good actor in that part, and they've been all wonderful.
Yeah.
And as a person who's watched all of them, I remember looking at Matt Smith going, you know what, he's taking elements of previous guys, but I think it's like he's got his own weird thing going on here. And he seems like an old man, and he seems like an alien. You go like, that's amazing. And
he does seem kind of alienish, actually, at all times.
Like a real weirdo. And then,
but I absolutely love his manicness.
Yeah.
It's just...
And so here you go. It's like, all right, where do you rank him? I just know, like, I love the new series Doctors. I'm really looking forward to Peter Capaldi. And at the end of it, I don't know if I want to say he's my favorite, but I do want to say while it's going on, oh, this is awesome, and I love his doctor. And when he goes away, being really sad about it, and then the new guy popping in there and going, I can't wait to see what this guy does.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was just researching online for songs for Doctor Who, and I found Rowan Atkinson did a parody of
written by Stephen Moffat.
Was that written by Stephen Moffat?
Curse of the Fatal Death. It's actually kind of, if you guys you can find it online. It's
the Rowan Atkinson one.
It's Rowan Atkinson one, and you can actually look at it and go like, a lot of Moffatisms are already present.
I didn't know that was written by Moffat.
Yeah,
and
it's written by.
Capaldi is in it.
What's that?
He plays the master. Rowan Atkinson plays. Sorry.
Oh, the guy who plays it it's not Capaldi.
Oh, was it?
No,
okay.
It's Jonathan Pierce.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Is that his name? Sorry, he's no, Jonathan Pryce. Jonathan Pryce, so like Bond villain, big character actor.
Yes.
And it's time paradoxes and a lot of Daleks and stuff like this, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's like
Cool.
But yeah, that was Moffat's first Doctor Who
That's funny.
script.
So yeah, we're pretty much out of time now, but
Which sucks because there's so much more we could
we
say and talk about.
There is so much
Yeah.
more, but thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us this week.
Yes.
And this was a lot of
I
fun.
hope you don't mind talking about Doctor Who.
Oh, it's torture.
I know. Sorry.
You know, it's actually a wonderful thing for me to be a creaky old fan like me and see that the show still's got life in it. People can still enjoy it and find fascination in it.
And then if you ever get older,
Yeah.
sorry, hopefully you will. I mean, if you have kids, that's
I really look forward to the bit where I could watch it with my kids. They'll
Yes.
probably be
Yeah.
too scared of it.
Yes. Well, they will, but it is something amazing to share those things with your kids.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, we got a few little bits of
We do?
business that we have to go. Well, we always do this at the end of the episode. Next week, don't forget, guys, that we are talking about the Oscars. So make sure you guys catch up on
crumbs.
all of your. Well, I'm gonna.
I might not be able to do that one.
Wait, am I here? Yeah.
Yes, I hope you're here because I've been planning these.
Okay.
I know. I don't have time. I'll talk to you about it after. But.
Okay.
Oscars.
We're going to be doing the Oscars. What we're going to be doing apparently will be.
I agree, Mercenary Pen.
Yeah.
Yes. So next week we're going to be talking about the Oscars. Join us for that. And then in not 2 weeks time, we're taking a break for the 22nd because Errol and Amanda will be at Kanji. I'll be visiting family and doing some other things. But the week after that, I believe, penciled in, not penned in yet.
I'm not here the week after that.
You said you were.
No, that's when I'm in California.
Yeah. The last week of
I asked
February.
you this like a month ago. No, not the last week of February. The first week of March.
Yeah.
It'll be March 2nd. I asked you about this a month ago.
Okay. All I know I'm in California.
Oh, we'll talk about this after.
Yes.
At some point after the Oscar episode, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, or 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, will be our 50th episode, guys, and it's going to be a big double episode. We've got a few things planned for it. I'm not sure. Do we want to announce what the topic is going to be yet, or do we want to spoil it? Do we want to tease it and
We
wait for
kind of
next
teased
week?
it and it was kind of obvious about what it was. So.
Yeah, I think I'm really the only one that would be excited about it, though. That's
I'm
just it.
excited about it.
I know, but I would be the only one that has any kind of excitement. Everybody's going, okay, whatever. So don't build it up too much, because then you're just going, really? That's it? Okay. It's about me! No, I'm kidding.
So next week, join us for the Oscars. It's not just going to be about
I'm
the
not
Oscars
enjoying the
this
latest
year.
series of Errol as much as I did the first.
This is very much.
Are we talking about My Neighbor Errol? What's wrong with the last... My Neighbor Errol last post was a brilliant.
Oh, I do a blog about Errol. If you guys don't know.
So yeah, next week it's going to be the Oscars. We're going to be talking a bit about the movies that are in the Oscar that'll be up for the Oscars this year, but we're also going to be talking about a bit of the history, a bit of the nomination process and whatnot, and all the stuff behind the scenes for how the Oscars work, because I'm very excited about the Oscars this year. There's some really cool movies that are up for it, and I want to have a conversation about that. And then 50th episode, we will
It should be a summer.
big fun episode. So join us for those, guys. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Just search out 3 Geeks in a Pod. If you want to email us, we are at 3geeksinapod@gmail.com. And don't forget to join us every Sunday night, 8 o'clock, live, Eastern Standard Time. Eastern, what's the other time? I don't remember.
There are other times.
EDT, Daylight Savings Time, whatever, 8 p.m. every Sunday, Eastern Time. You can find us at 3geeksinapod/live. Join us in chat for conversation. And that'll do it for this week, guys.
Thanks for having me. My name's not Manda.
I'm not Ja-Mez.
My name's not Andrew.
My name's not... Wait, Errol, sorry. My bad.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. It's a birthday for Corey.
It's a birthday for Kari.
Corey birthday.
That sounds nice. I'm sure she appreciates that.